Well, welcome to this, the seventh day of Sukah, our celebration in year 5992, just 8 years before the final fulfillment of our time to return to the garden and camp out with our Heavenly Father. It is my great pleasure to be with you this evening. As you can see, for the seventh night of Sukah, we have illuminated yet another fire. And that fire is essential for this day, not only for what we're going to consider in terms of entering the light of Yahweh, but for what we have read, because many, many times over, Yahweh not only encourages us to approach this fiery light, to be transformed so that we can appear before Him on Yom Kippurim and again on Chag Sukah. It is by approaching this fire that we, as mortal beings, trapped in these limited physical bodies, can be transformed, literally becoming light and energy like our God, so that we can thrive eternally, entering and exploring the dimensions of this universe into the fourth dimension of time, the fifth and sixth and seventh dimension, being able to observe all that God created, not just that 5% that is evident to us in the 2 trillion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars, most of them with solar systems and planets, but also so that we have this opportunity to also understand and enjoy the dimensions that represent dark energy and dark matter, one for choice, the other for attraction. This is what God has in store for us, that on Sukah is when we are finally transformed such that we can be like light and energy, like our God, and receiving the full benefits that have been promised through Bikurim and Gebuwrah, where we are enriched, we are enabled, we are empowered by the Creator of the universe to be more like Him, like light. And so with that in mind, we witness this fire glowing out there, also in its flames dancing in the waters. We are reminded that there will be a fire just like this on the Temple Mount, on Ruwach, the first day of Chag Sukah, each year, and particularly on year 6000, in 2033. This fire will blaze beginning on the Shabbat, on the 24th of September of 2033, just as we see it here. Brilliant, dancing flames reaching up to the sky, the smoke permeating the air such that we can sense the transformation that is taking place, the warmth inviting us to come near, the crackle of that sound as we listen to what is being said on this day. And with that water combined with the fire, we are purged of our guilt. We are prepared, finally, to be fully exposed and comfortable in Yahweh's sight. And by we, I'm speaking of this final remnant of Yisrael, so that on Yom Kippurim, when Dod returns with Yahweh, they will not be as they were 3,450 years prior, where they were so uncomfortable in God's presence that they told God to shush up and go away. They didn't want to hear from Him or see Him again, and He will have waited these 34 centuries for this moment, when they might be purged of their guilt, so that they will be comfortable, exposed in His presence, embraced by this light and by these cleansing waters, such that we will have the greatest of celebrations on Yom Kippurim as our King returns, and then on Sukah as our God brings us back into Gan Eden. So once we turn the page on Sukah, there is still a lot to learn in his very next line in the Torah, from the one that we concluded our last program in Kara, Yahweh addresses his tabernacle, and he calls it the Sukah of Yatzah. So let's linger here in Kara just a while longer so that we are more fully aware and can more completely comprehend what it means to camp out with God in his light. So immediately after presenting his Mow'ed Miqra, Yahweh introduces the connection between these 7 celebrations and the relationship of his menorah. I have 2 of them, one on either side of me, with its 7 luminaries, such there is one for every meeting, each illuminated by olive oil, Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, Gebuwrah, Ruwach, then Kippurim, and Sukah. Then Yahweh, which is an accurate presentation of the name of Eloah, God, as guided by his Torah instructions regarding his Haya existence. He spoke to Moshe, whose name means one who draws out, saying, oh my, I just have to tell you that is such an amazingly beautiful scene, even as the 2 souls float there in the waters. The Yahweh's favorite color, blue. Second is likely white. The warmth of the fire, the mesmerizing nature of the dancing flames, the beauty of water, and the reflecting of that light in the water. It's truly beautiful. By the way, if you look behind that fire, there over the light, there we go. Hello, everybody. There we are inside of this library studio. You see the room that we managed to turn into our main library studio. It used to be my office here overlooking the pool. And on the other side of the pool, that we've done it in the past, turn the camera around. It's a beautiful sunset this evening, and shown the ocean and the sky and the islands out to sea. So it is indeed beautiful. There is our loggia of jacuzzi deck. Whoa, boy, we're really going fast now. Yikes. That was a fast transition. You might want to go up and broaden a little bit and have a bit more sky. So that folks can see where we are. Little hint of red there, even higher. There is more red, and to the right, I think, even more rich as you turn the camera. I think you're going to the left rather than the right, but that's okay. Be your other right in that process, and maybe pan out a little bit. It would get more of it. I just think it's a beautiful evening. You can see some of the reddish hues there in the sky, and particularly as he goes further to the right, there we are. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? I knew you'd find it. Wow. I'm sorry if I'm distracted here, but the very fact is that God's creation is so beautiful. I think in a very real way, God has placed us here in this garden oasis in the middle of the sea, so that we might enjoy being able to share with you what God is offering to all of us, bringing us back to an idyllic situation. Here's a place where the temperature is always mild, the breezes always blow. It is just green, blue, and gorgeous, even with the reddish glow here of that orangish sunset. Thank you, Yah, for another wonderful evening. And this is God's way of saying, you're not the only one that can have a fire. I can build one in the sky and illuminate it in the celebration of Sukah, and silhouette it with palm fronds and place it above the sea in a garden oasis. Yeah, you don't want to compete with God. He's He's got more talent than the rest of us can possibly imagine. Well, then Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, instruct the children of Israel, those sons who are willing to engage and endure with God, so that they obtain such they grasp hold of and select and receive for you pure and clear olive oil, which is beaten out by crushing for the luminary. Now, isn't that interesting? Yahweh has three really important metaphors. And here he's actually explaining one of the things that I was able to deduce about why he chose these three metaphors. They are olives, which when crushed create olive oil, which is pure and clear and produces beautiful light, the ultimate luminary for the ancient world. And then you have grapes, when crushed, can create wine, which is the most, I think, elegant and satisfying, purely delicious of drinks, and so symbolic of Yah's relationship with us. And of course, there is grain, again, where the kernels must be crushed into flour and then baked as bread. Three things, with the kernels symbolizing saved souls, and the grapes symbolizing what it is like to be grafted onto the vine that is Yisrael, and what it is that we should appreciate of Dod's great sacrifice for us on Passover, and how it is the blood of that lamb, Dod, that gives us life. And of course, here, olives, which, beaten out by crushing, produce the pure and clearest oil. You probably already know, but you know what extra virgin olive oil means? That doesn't mean the olives have never been on a date. No, it's that a date has never cohabitated with an olive, because that would be interspecies now, wouldn't it? That would be contrary to Yahweh's instructions. No, what extra virgin olive oil means is that olive oil came from the initial press, the first press of the olives, and one, if it's extra virgin, that is not too rough on the olive. So you get the best possible, purest oil out of the fruit, is an extra virgin olive oil. So instruct the children of Israel, so they obtain for you pure and clear olive oil, which is beaten out by crushing for the luminary, La Ha Ma'or, for the source of light. From Ma, to ponder the implications of Or, light which shines brightly, illuminating and enlightening. And for what purpose? We've shared this before. What is the symbol? What is the purpose of that fire that is roaring out there? It is to lift us up so that we could be continuous and enduring, and to serve as a lamp to lighten our nights so that they along our days. It's such a spectacular metaphor, and it's all conveyed here in Kara, called out, should never have been called Leviticus 24, 1 and 2. So this is Yahweh's version of literally the eternal flame. But there is more to the metaphor than pure, clean, and clear, even flawless olive oil, being the symbol of the set-apart spirit and of light representing Yahweh. There is more to the lamp than the idea of providing guidance and enlightenment. There is more to Yahweh's tangible metaphor than continuous and enduring, because God will advance the story of this luminary and define its purpose by telling us where it goes and how it is to be constructive. But beyond all of this, never lose sight of the fact that fire elongates our days, consistent with living forever. It enlightens us so that we can see, consistent with being observant. And it is transformative, taking us out of these mortal, limited physical bodies so that we can be enriched and empowered and enabled more completely as light and as energy. So olives, like grapes and grain, as I have mentioned, must be crushed to be useful. Likewise, so are the challenges we overcome in life that forge our character. And as the case with Sukah, it is not until after enduring the crushing hardships of the time of Jacob's troubles that Israel finally becomes salvageable. You know, we just had this wonderful visit from Shannon, who is probably already back in Florida now. And, you know, he has had some great tragedy and great triumphs in his life. And through it all, it has forged a remarkable character. So has my friend Richard, having gone through great joys and great sadness, all developing the kind of personality, the attitude and attributes that are so useful to God. None of those who serve God come into that service unblemished. It's one of the great myths that my friend Rich loves to talk about. This idea of perfection and that God wants us to be perfect. No, he wants to perfect us. That is so incredibly different than being perfect. We are flawed, and it's our flaws that give us character. It's the failures in our lives that help define us because we have to overcome them. And when we do, we become vastly more confident and enabled. But it's also that great imposter called success that we must also manage and overcome. All of these things serve to build that character, that backbone, that grit that has value to God. And so it isn't being perfect that God is interested in. It's this process of being perfected, of becoming more than we would have been if not for overcoming our challenges and our successes, such that we become ever more useful, ever more productive, ever more valuable, always learning, coming to understand more and more as we go. You know, that's one of the things that I've just so much enjoyed over this last year. And those of you who have been with me for 10, 15, 20 years, some even longer than that, you know that our growth has been incremental. We learned a lot. I mean, I was sharing this afternoon, and one of the things I was writing for Bashar Herald, which is Coming Home Volume 4, that one of the first insights that I was able to deduce, and it was from Hosha, was that there are 3 destinations for human souls, that most souls simply seem to exist at the end of their mortal lives, and very, very few end up in Shamayim, and while more end up in Sheol. And in Shamayim, it is restricted for those who have deliberately led others astray. This was an insight that no one had perceived previously, and it was a big deal because agnostics are agnostic because they recognize a God who would say, love me or I will torture you forever, isn't lovable. And so by revealing that God said that there are 3 destinations for human souls, and the majority of souls aren't rewarded or punished. They are given their lives, they're given free will, they're given a nasama to reason things through, and they just don't make the connections to understand Yahweh. So at the end of their lives, it's just the end of their lives. One of the things that is so puzzling in this regard, of course, is that the most recent attacks on me have been people falsely accusing me of saying that I'm sending them to the darkness pit of hell, where they'll be tortured forever, because there's no torture in hell. And the only reason they know hell is dark is everybody had previously presented as the fires of hell. And I said, no, there's no fires in hell. There's no light in hell, because it is a black hole. First person to deduce any of those things. And I'm also the first person to say that if you don't mislead others, if you just go about your business misled, You don't go there. Your soul simply seems to exist at the end of your mortal existence. They would know nothing of this if it hadn't been among the very first insights that Yahweh shared with me. Well, now 24 years ago. And it's profound. So another profound insight is that we enter the time of Jacob's troubles on the 22nd of May, 2026. 8 months from now, with Israel being forced to forfeit its heart, such that it becomes an award to the Islamic State, making Israel indefensible and bringing in this time of Israel's trouble, which is actually necessary, because without it, there would be very few Yehudim who would listen in the end and be among those who are part of that final remnant of Yisrael, who avail themselves of the sacrifice of the Yah𐤄𤅅𤄗 on Ruwach and are able to witness Yahweh and Dod's return on Kippurim, such that they enter the Garden of Eden on Sukah. So this olive oil lamp, getting back to the story I was telling here, I just love all things related to Yahweh, so you'll excuse me if I share stories that I think are related to the message he is conveying. But the menorah, the olive oil lamp, represents to some degree the Ruach Kodesh, that olives are deeply rooted in the land. They are long-lived. The oil is nutritious. It serves as a healing ointment, and olive oil is used for anointing and provides brilliant illumination. But most of all, it's the oil that burns brightly, conveying the transformative nature of those 7 Mow'ed Miqra, represented by the 7 candles on Yahweh's luminary. And it is interesting, of course, that I began the first 22 years of my journey with God, presenting everything under this little logo. It's a lion, and the lion is symbolic of the Lion of Judah, and Dod is the Lion of Judah, and therefore it seemed to be an appropriate metaphor, and particularly since we are the first to recognize who Dod actually is and all that he accomplished by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and that it is Dod who is returning as king. But that isn't Yahweh's primary logo. And even Dod would have a conniption fit if he knew we were using the lion as opposed to the proper logo that is symbolic of Yahweh's relationship with him and symbolic of what Dod achieved and what his herald will achieve. And that is of the menorah, in that it represents the 7 steps that we take to God. It represents the very colors of that, the 7 colors of the rainbow that are a metaphor for the covenant. It is just the essential luminary, the greatest of all luminaries, representing Yahweh and his plan to reconcile his relationship with us, also representing the 7,000-year period from the garden back to the garden and celebrating life for 1,000 years in Eden. So as the Isle of Oil is ignited, illuminating the home, we see the flame reaching upward, consistent with the symbolism of approaching this feminine manifestation of God's fiery light during Matzah, during Gebuwrah, during Kippurim, and during Sukah. Those so enlightened will Allah rise up to God. Moreover, when we capitalize upon Yahweh's 7 invitations to be called out and meet these Miqra, our stay in Shamaim as Yah𐤄𤅅𤄗𝐄𝐄, perfected luminaries, will be timid, continuous, and enduring. Of course, for those who know the whole of God's story, you recognize that even in the 4th day of creation, drawing our attention to the 4th era of human existence outside of the garden, 33 CE to be exact, Yahweh would have the greater luminary, the man who will return, whose throne is as brilliant as the sun. He would make the ultimate sacrifice to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, so that we might be enriched and empowered and enabled by God on those called out assemblies to meet. And so it is exceedingly important from that point of view. And also we're told that the lesser luminary will reflect the greater luminary's light in the darkness of these times, so that they collectively serve as the signs of the Mow'ed. Because indeed, in addition to the greater luminary, Dode, fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in 33 CE, it is the lesser luminary who will fulfill to Ruwach through his sacrifice in 2033. From outside the curtain of the restoring witness to the eternal testimony, the written copy of the account entered into evidence, including the stipulations regarding the provisions and attestation of the revelation from Mow'ed, repeatedly bearing witness to renewal and to restoration. Within the tent and tabernacle, the OL, the covered shelter and protective dwelling which shines clearly and brightly, the home and the household of the eternal witness to the eternal testimony for these appointments. Mow'ed, which is from Mo and Ed, which is, you've got Rich.
I know.
Okay. Rich. We had a light echo of that for this whole program, but it really came to life there at a moment in time.
Sorry about that,
but that's okay. You know,
I'm like, where is that coming from?
We're being perfected. We're not perfect. It is a process. We do live streams. We do not rehearse. We do not polish this program. We probably can tell that just by the quality of it.
We're a well-oiled machine.
We are. We are a well olive-oiled machine. It is true that in this case that Mow'ed means to ponder the implications of the restoring witness to the eternal testimony regarding these appointments. It's a marvelous word, is it not? So it is the tent of the restoring witness to the eternal testimony. When God is responsible for naming rights, he's really, really good at it. And he does say at that point, Aaron, which is an enlightened expression of free will, as an alternative, the bringer of light and choice from R, presenting a desirable option under the auspices of free will as an alternative and own pertaining to enlightenment, which is transliterated Aaron, the brother of Moshe and Eloah, although he was an exceedingly troubled soul. It's kind of interesting, of course, that I think we're going to need to put another log, my friend, on that fire. Otherwise, it's going to die down before we get finished with this show. But it was God's choice was Moshe. He knew that Moshe had the experience, understanding the political and religious systems and the caste systems of Mitzrayim and the plight of the Hebrews there, and that he had the character to stand up for the oppressed people. And he had the wisdom to leave all that behind and reject it, walking away from it, making him the perfect candidate to serve alongside Yahweh, to unslave and liberate his people. But Moshe was reluctant. He said he didn't speak very clearly. I didn't try that same technique. I'm sure it would have worked for me about as well as it worked for Moshe, because Yahweh snapped right back and said, "Hey, Moshe, come on. Who do you think designed the mouth? I just happen to be God. And so since I designed it, don't you think I can make it work?" And what really happened from the point that Moshe had the meltdown, when he just says, "Listen, these people are obnoxious. No one can lead them. This is an impossible job. I want out. If you have any respect for me, you're going to kill me, as opposed to have me continue to endure this madness." From that point on, Yahweh used Moshe's mouth. He spoke right through him. What Moshe would say from that point on was from the very voice of God. When the children of Israel said, "We don't want to hear your voice, we don't want to see you again," he said, "All right, I can work with this. You can look at Moshe and you can hear his vocal cords move, but it'll be my voice that is projected through him." Aaron was presented as the alternative, and Moshe said, "But I stutter. I got a stick tongue, words really well," which for me is just hilarious, because people are all hung up on Yahweh's name, and they say, "Well, it's out of respect for his name, we don't want to mispronounce it, that we don't say it," which of course is just a blatant lie, because Moshe slurred his words and God picked him to introduce his name to us, which says, I'm not really worried about you saying it perfectly. What I want is for people to know it and to use it and not be worried about mispronouncing it. Just use it. It's easy to pronounce. I revealed it in the Torah. That's how you pronounce the Wa. I told you it was based on Haya. That's how you pronounce the other letters. This isn't difficult. Anyway, so when Moshe was reluctant, Yahweh said, "Okay, well, your brother's coming around the corner and he's a blabbermouth. So what if he tags along?" Ooh, big mistake. Nonetheless, that's what it took to get Moshe to go along. So it's Aaron that shall attend to it and arrange it, placing it from sundown to sunrise in the presence of Yahweh, continuously and without interruption. From sundown, which is what we did today on our fire, to sunrise. All in the presence of Yahweh, continuously without interruption. We light the menorah, 7 candles with olive oil. Yahweh's light appears in our presence, continuously without interruption. And of course, it's there from sundown to sunrise. Why? Because in the darkest hours is when we need the light. That is why the lesser luminary reflects the sun's light during the darkness. It is an everlasting prescription of what you should do throughout your households and generations. Korah called out, never should have been called, Leviticus 24:3. So why did the goddamn rabbis create a 9-candle knockoff of God's light? Why did they attribute it to a civil war of people vying for prestige and for money and for control? And God said that's not what it's for at all. Why did they erase Yahweh's name when God said very clearly that this was about being in his presence? Why did they replace his Torah with the Talmud? Why did they change God's Sukah, inscribed prescriptions for what you should do in life to live, for rabbinical laws? Why did they do those things? Particularly when God said this is an eternal prescription for what you should do in life if you want to live, no matter where or when you live. So we have made the connection between the menorah and the Mow'ed, while considering the role of the 2 olive trees on either side of Yahweh's luminary as they were introduced in the 4th chapter of Zechariah. I've done Yahweh blogs on it, and I have written extensively about those 2 olive trees as the 2 witnesses, as Yada and Elia, and of them being on either side of the menorah, because Yahweh is in their presence and they are sharing Yahweh's light, and that is why they're presented as such in the 4th chapter of Zechariah. What may have appeared to be conjecture then has now been confirmed. The menorah is the light of the Mow'ed, of the restoring witness to the eternal testimony regarding these appointments. While we are not explicitly told, the reasoned conclusion is that the spring Miqra, Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim lead to Gebuwrah, and the 3 fall Miqra follow to Ruwach, Kippurim, and Sukah, flowing out of it. This would place Gebuwrah in the middle, representing the center light, which is appropriate since it is the day set apart, and that the standing grain is enlightened, enriched, and empowered as they rise up to God. It is also why God told us that we meet with him 3 times a year. There's 7 Mow'ed Miqra, but we meet with God 3 times a year. And that is because Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim are one integrated event, Chag Matzah. And Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukah are also one comprehensive celebration of our relationship with God, called Chag Sukah, with the harvest of Gebuwrah set between them. So at this point, Aaron had been a bad boy, so he would be restricted to the other side of the veil. He would need a special dispensation, I would say, to approach the Ark of the Covenant. God did not take kindly to the golden calf affair. Nevertheless, Aaron is representative of enlightened free will. Moreover, he is presented as the alternative to Moshe. And in the beginning, he was asked to speak whenever Moshe was tongue-tied. In the end, his role was that of a priest, such that his name reveals that he is the bringer of light and choice that will ultimately be afforded to Dowd. The Oel is a Sukah of sorts. According to God, it is anyway. Both provide a covering and protection from the elements. Both serve as homes. Both would become far more established and substantial, becoming ever more Sukah, a covering that was protective. Similarly, Eduth and Mow'ed address the same idea. Ha-Eduth is an attestation of the testimony and enduring accounting of the witness. It is differentiated from Mow'ed by the realization that God's intent is to be Ud, repetitive regarding his reconciling revelations. The Mow'ed convey the eternal testimony of the restoring witness of Yahweh. So with Yahweh, there would always be light. So long as they listened to God and did as he requested, his luminary would shine through the darkness in even the most troubling times. This depiction of the menorah characteristics matches the set-apart spirit's attributes in some ways as well. This is why it is being placed adjacent to Yahweh's presence. Yahweh's presence is conveyed through his Ruwach. It has been afforded 7 times over to the Choder. Upon the purifying and perfecting menorah, he will arrange and place the lamps such that they are continually before the presence of Yahweh. Korah, called out, never should have been Leviticus 24:4. We have expanded the association between Mow'ed and Yahweh's tabernacle, between the menorah and the Mow'ed, and now to the menorah and Yahweh's presence. The reason the 6+1 configuration of the menorah isn't designated here because, well, it was detailed in Shemot, names, never should have been called Exodus, 25:31-40. And that explanation reads as follows. You shall make a purifying and cleansing, a restoring and renewing, a perfecting and flawless. Again, that same context, this idea that we aren't to be perfect, but we are to be perfected. We are to be restored. We are to be renewed. And that is what we are to fashion here and act upon. So you shall make a purifying and cleansing, a restoring and renewing, a perfecting menorah, a lampstand, a luminary, and a source of light from gold, artistically crafted, elegantly decorated, turned and hammered out, embossed of wrought metal. You know, the actual menorah is a very traditional design, and it was absolutely perfect for the time and conveyed many symbolic ideas. And that was why it was such an interesting discussion with Yahweh back in December of last year, when he made it clear that he wanted to be represented by the menorah. And you can see the one over my left shoulder is modern in its design. And he even said, no, I want it to be modern. I want a modern adaptation of that menorah. And the reason is we're going to use a modern means to convey that light. You know, we're going to set up cameras and lights, and you and I are going to vlog, baby. So here we are with a modern interpretation of the menorah. And with a Roy G. Biv rainbow interpretation of its light to associate it with the covenant for which those 7 Mow'ed Miqra enable our presence. So the menorah, this lampstand, this luminary, this source of light should be made with her base and sides, her stems and branches, her cups, her ornamental buds, and her flowers as part of it. Each time we read tahor, purifying and cleansing, associated with the menorah, we should see that God is desirous of perfecting us, of enlightening us, of protecting us, of keeping us warm, keeping us enlightened, keeping us properly defended, just as a fire keeps the most vicious animals away. Even the smoke will keep those dadgone mosquitoes from biting. Even her garment of light in terms of the Ruwach is Miqra, artificially crafted and artistically crafted and elegantly decorated. And I will tell you that, you know, my interest in the garment of light, which comes from Yahshua, single mention, and the association with the Ruwach, was actually designed to resolve a problem that Dode fixed quite nicely. And that is, how does God perfect us? It's obvious that that God tells us to walk to him so that he can perfect us. And we walk to God through the Mow'ed Miqra, and that it would be the second of the 3 spring Miqra that would be responsible for accomplishing this. And so that our souls are unyeasted of religious and political corruption on matzah. And until I recognized that Dode had volunteered to serve as the Passover lamb and to have his soul carry our guilt into Sheol, you know, you're naturally looking for, how does God go about hiding and covering and obliterating our guilt so that we appear perfected? And so the garment of light by the set apart spirit was the best answer I could come up with, because I want to tell you, it takes some doing to recognize that Dode served as the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Miqra, because you not only have to understand how that would be possible, but how Dode managed to figure out that he should volunteer, and then understand his motivation for volunteering to endure being crucified by the Romans and have his soul enter Sheol in his second of 3 lives. And then you'd have to have an appreciation as to why God approved it and accepted his son in this role. And we have gone through all of that previously and how it was revealed to us. And I've walked you through how all of those things happened. And then you read Dode's first-person testimony of precisely how he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Miqra 1,000 years before he endured it. And then we've read his testimony in 555 BCE in Babel when he arrived as Gabriel, which is God's most capable and courageous man, and told us the exact day that he would fulfill Chag Matzah in 33 CE, which is year 4000 Yah. And so all the way through, we have come to know that Dode did these things, meaning that the Spirit plays a role, but the Spirit's role is really secondary to what Dode achieved, in the sense that the Spirit protected Dode's nephesh soul as he carried our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there and never to be seen again, and then helped release Dode's soul from Sheol unharmed so that he could return to his father. So the Ruwach is a tool that Yahweh uses in this regard. And it is also the tool that Yahweh has dispatched 7 times over to enable the Choder to be able to ascertain these insights and then to share them with you. So menorah, which is also a feminine noun, is a representation of menor, luminary. This association is also interesting as well. Now, further, when we are allowed to enter this transformative state, we become members of the covenant. We branch out, we bud, we blossom, we grow. Consistent with this message, Parak, translated as flowers, also means to rise up and fly. It is from Perkach, meaning a gathering of offspring with a common nature. Our Father is speaking of his family, being able to fly like spiritual beings. Vocalized as Parak, it means to sprout, to flourish, and to bear fruit, and especially to grow. In our eternal nature, we are gaining dimensions and energy, becoming ever more like God. So yes, the 7 luminaries on the menorah represent Pesach, Matzah, and Miqra, Shabu in the middle, and then on the other side, Ruwach, Kippurim, and Sukah. And indeed, the 7 lamps serve as the sign of the covenant, with a light for each of the 7 colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. However, since the menorah also represents these Mow'ed Miqra, we are reminded that it is the 7 spirits of Yahweh who have provided his Choder, the secondary branch, the sucker and stem, with the ability to understand these things for the first time ever, and then share them with you. The 7 spirits of Yahweh, represented by the 7 luminaries on that menorah, are the Ruwach of Yahweh in the center, orchestrating and illuminating the relationship, making the Choder the voice, the kol voice of Yahweh, the very peh mouth of God at this time, serving as his Nakri, observant foreigner. He has the Ruwach of Chokmah, of mental aptitude, of intelligence, because he would have to ascertain from the Torah and prophets thousands of insights never previously deduced, and then share them in a way that others would come to understand, appreciate, and grow from them. The Ruwach of Binah, my favorite, which I think is becoming a favorite of many. That's understanding. Knowing is great. Very few people actually know, but understanding is infinitely superior. It is from Winn, which speaks of making the connections between the things we have come to know so that we can comprehend their relationship. 4 is the Ruwach of Etzah. It's of being able to offer advice after being able to perceive the entire picture from beginning to end, to frame the portrait that God has painted, and to show us his story as we live in Eden to the time we return to Eden. It is the one thing I think that has distinguished this Yahowah series more than anything, is it takes you from beginning to end and reveals everything you need to know about forming a relationship with God. The Ruwach that is probably the most valuable at this time is the Ruwach of Gebuwrah, of confidence and courage, of being a fighter, of never capitulating, of always being bold, being courageous, being tough. Because this is a tough job. No one has succeeded previously in bringing God's people to him, in being able to draw Israelites to Yahweh. Moshe tried and gave up. The Israelites were too tough an audience. Dowd, the greatest of us, tried and finally capitulated at the end when his own son led a rebellion against him, just as Moshe's brother and sister led one against him. And so to do this job, one has to be a fighter, a battler, tough, courageous, and confident. The Ruwach of Gebuwrah. And then there, of course, is the Ruwach of Dayath. Without knowing, there is no understanding. But the reason this is at the end is because the purpose of the choter is to be a stem off that fallen stump, not only that represents Israel, but long before Israel would exist, that represents the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Because without that knowledge, there is no return to the tree of lives. And so he is the Ruwach of Dayath, of knowledge. And he is the Ruwach of Yirah, of great appreciation for all that Yahweh holds dear. I am routinely advised, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other thing. You're wrong about this, you're wrong about that. And my response is always the same. For 24 years, I have studied, translated, and made the connections to understand the words of Yahweh. I know his teaching. I know his example. And in every situation, I try to learn from what he said. And almost every occasion, more so now than ever before, he has a prophetic example of exactly what we're enduring. And he has established the example we should follow. And so I tell everyone I appreciate the advice, but I can never go wrong if I learn from Yahweh and follow his example. I appreciate him doing this for us. I appreciate him. I appreciate the opportunity to serve. And I love this opportunity to reintroduce Dowd as our Savior while reacquainting Yisrael with Yahweh's name. Well, the opening verb in this next statement is one of the most underappreciated in the Torah. It is yatzah. It means to be removed or withdrawn, to come out and to leave, to be brought out and to come forth. It's the operative term of what's called the Exodus because of the influence of the Greek language in Christianity. It is likewise essential to the Mow'ed, Miqra, because we are being withdrawn from the world of men to enter the realm of God. It is part of the Bereth because we are cut into this covenant. And long ago, God led his people out of Mitzrayim, the religious and political cauldrons of oppression. And now he is calling them out of Babel, which is the confusing and confounding intermixing of truth and lies, of religion and politics before leading his people home. And 6 branches shall come out from her sides, 3 stems of the menorah from one of her sides, and 3 branches of the menorah from the other side. Shemot names should never have been called Exodus. 25:32. 6 is the number of man, who was created on the 6th day as a carbon-based life form with the atomic number of 6. And there would be 6 branches representing 3 sets, or 2 sets of 3. Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. Teruah, Kapurim, and Sukah. 3 stems of the menorah from one of her sides, and 3 branches of the menorah from the other side. So when it comes to his pattern of 6 plus 1, God is consistent. Everything meaningful is based on it. It is the key that unlocks the secrets otherwise hidden in Yahweh's plan of reconciliation and his redemptive timeline, so that we know exactly where we are on it. Just 8 years prior to his return with our Messiah and King, his beloved Son, our Savior, Dod. Of notable interest here, Yahweh has described 6 luminaries representing humankind in this equation, but has not so much as mentioned his own luminary in the center of the menorah. This perspective is one of many ways Yahweh is distinguished from the plethora of gods that men have made that are always calling attention to themselves. You see, Yahweh long ago decided that he would work through people and he would credit those who serve with him. There are 3 cups in the shape of almond flowers with each branch. On each one, there is an ornamental bud, a capital, on the top of a column, along with the blossom. Then there are 3 cups in the shape of almond flowers for each branch. On one, there is an ornamental bud, a capital, on the top of the column, along with a blossom. Therefore, 6 branches shall come out from the menorah. Shemot names should not have been Exodus 25:33. The almond is the first tree to flower in Israel each spring, heralding the approach of the new year. The blossom is pure white, symbolic of the menorah's light. The protective calyxes around the unopened buds are often red, symbolic of Passover. An almond is not actually a nut, but rather a drupe. But unlike its cousins, the peach, the plum, and cherry, we actually eat the seed. Also, since most varieties are incompatible and cannot pollinate themselves, at least 2 trees are needed if they are to bear fruit, as in the case with a relationship, as is the case with the spring and the fall Miqra, as is the case with the greater and lesser luminary, as is the case with man and woman, to come together, to be fruitful, and conceive and raise children. Almonds grown in Israel are larger, tastier, and contain more vitamins than those grown elsewhere. It's a fact. They provide calcium, protein, vitamins E and B, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, manganese, natural fiber, antioxidants, and cholesterol-lowering monosaturated fat. As for the petals, between 1 and 21% of almonds have 6 per blossom, while the most prevalent flowers feature 5. It is principally a 5-blossom flower. Now, speaking of numbers, we have 1 representing Yahweh in the center. There are 2 sides of the menorah to depict the luminaries because there are 3 Mow'edim in the 1st and 7th months. There are 6 subordinate lights representing the number of man. And then, of course, the menorah is comprised of 7 overall lamps, which are symbolic of the Mow'ed and of Yahweh's overall plan and timeline. The only relevant number not yet mentioned is 4. It serves as the primary interval of time between the Torah's most relevant events. Therefore, and this will be our conclusion to this program this evening as we enjoy the warm autumn breezes here in these Virgin Islands and feel the warmth and the glow of that fire. And on the menorah, there shall be 4 cups in the shape of almond flowers, an ornamental bud, along with a blossom. Shemot names should never have been Exodus 25:34. Should you be wondering why Yahweh is providing this itemization of the Gebuwrah cups, these containers housing enlightening olive oil, which provide direction for our lives? The answer is that there are 22 of them. When you put it all together, there are 22. Does that number ring a bell with you, Rich? 22. What are there 22 in Yahweh's Torah and his prophets that comprise every word that we read?
The 119th Psalm
Is comprised of 22 stanzas, each devoted to one of the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Hebrew alphabet has 5, the number of petals on the flower, the almond flower, 5 vowels, open mouth sounds, and 17 consonants, for a total of 25 letters. And there are 22, therefore, Gebuwrah cups, these containers housing enlightening oil, providing direction for our lives, just as there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet to enlighten us, to instruct us. And that is our enlightening instruction for this evening as we enjoy the enlightenment of that fire. And I even think we have outside Miss Leah and Miss Cara. And so we are off to enjoy the fire. Hello there, sweetheart. You too, Cara. How are you?
She woke up from her nap.
Okay. Well, folks, we're going to let the camera continue to roll on that fire. We're just going to go outside and enjoy the evening. Cara, you're perfectly named for what we're going to do the 7th evening.
Yeah.
In fact, because the sun has now set, guess what we're enjoying? The eighth day of Sukah has has just begun. Thank you. Cara says, hello, everybody. Yeah, I want to do the show. I'm ready. Put me in, coach. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Hi, buddy. Hi, baby. She's looking for her mama.